Hey, you beautiful being. Welcome to Empowered Human. I am your host, Nina Garcia, and this podcast is fantastic for all of you who have been listening, for all of you who are newly listening. It's fantastic if you say, I'm the person who wants to do that personal work that everybody's talking about. I'm the person who wants to practice engaging as an empowered human in this world, which means y'all know our three pillars. We're about courage, healing, and belonging. So I got a playful personality. We play with really scary things sometimes, and then we transform them right from hard conversations into teachable moments, right? I don't know why I say that every episode. Wow, so human. Can I just one more time? Will you guys give me grace and we won't edit that out? Transforming hard conversations into teachable moments. That's what we're doing. Okay, thank you for your grace. And now we shall keep going. Today's episode features a special guest. We have Susan Gold with us. Now, Susan Gold, for those of you who do not know, is the author of Toxic Family, right? This is a book, Toxic Family, Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom. So already, if that is piquing your interest, you're going to want to listen in. The question that we would be exploring in this upcoming episode is, how can we survive narcissistic abuse? Is it possible? What can we do? What can we learn? If you are saying, yes, Nina, I am about that, I want to explore that topic, then welcome, friend, because we're going to be playing with that today. Grab a journal or a really good friend to dialogue with about what is going to inevitably come up for you in this episode. Because, of course, by now, you know, we are so curious. Are you ready to play? And just as a little bonus here, for those of you who are like, wait a minute, we stopped there and then we go into the thing we do normally, but I want to read this off for you. The start of this book as described by Google Books. Check this out. In a small rural town in central Pennsylvania, young Susie is facing trauma as the middle child in a violent and chaotic household. True story, friends. Her brilliant, alcoholic astrophysicist father and equally ingenious, mentally ill homemaking mother have collided in dysfunction. Dot, dot, dot. If you weren't ready before, get ready now. Y'all know I'm curious. Take two. You ready to play? Welcome to Empowered Human, the dramatically playful podcast that invites you to heal humanity, the one within you, me, and the world at large. I'm your host, drama therapist, empowerment specialist, and not to mention empowered human, Nina Garcia, and I'm so stoked you're joining me on the journey. Every Wednesday, you are invited to explore transforming from powered to empowered with genuinely human stories of courageous existence, healing from invalidation, and truly belonging to you. So wherever you are on the spectrum, from empowerment curious to empowered human ambassador, this podcast is designed to humanize. Get ready to lean into your edge, heal your worldview, and finally belong to you. This is Empowered Human. Let's go ahead and take a breath. Whatever your body needs in this moment, exhaling out and down as we get ready to welcome Susan to the studio. Welcome, Susan.
Hey, Nina, here we are, empowered and human.
I love it. I love it. Before we even go into the consent piece, y'all, I was speaking with Susan just before we started recording, and I was like, is there anything else you want me to know? And Susan, like, very grounded, very centered, just looks at me and was like, you are worthy, you are valued, said several other beautiful things, right? And like, basically like, you matter. And it was just so peaceful. What a way to start before I hit that record button. Thank you for that, Susan.
Yeah, and I want to extend that to your listeners because so much of the time we're just whizzing through it all, right? We have that impossible to-do list and the nth degree of perfection that's been foisted upon us. And it's really difficult and challenging to remember that we have value and we are worthy just for being ourselves. That's why I love that you took a breath as we started. So
Mm.
beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So now we will get back into that. Let's talk consent here, right? As we move forward into this podcast, we know that we might be hitting moments that are sticky or uncomfortable. And, we consent, we've agreed, we've talked about it, we know what the arena might look like, we're willing to go into it. And, I've got your back as much as I can, or side, or wherever you need me to be. And I hope you've got me the same. Do we consent to both moving forward?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. So, brief intro, Susan. Just who are you as a human being? What does it mean for you to be an empowered human?
Well, I'm quite empathic, which means I grabbed the touch and feel of your emotion before our cameras even hit go. And I have high sensitivity, and I am quite intuitive. And for a lot of years, I shoved that under the closest carpet because it felt intrusive. And I'm so grateful that veil has thinned by what some would say a very treacherous walk on this planet.
Thank you so much for that, in a nutshell, right? Encapsulation of you. Obviously, audience, it is not everything about Susan, but just the ability to acknowledge that you are a person who is sensitive, right? For all of our listeners out there who are also sensitive. And for so many people who I think need to hear the part that you shared next, which is you shoved it under the carpet, right? So to speak. Some people are like, it's in the closet, it's in the attic, it's right behind the shelf, wherever it is. But how many of us are actually uber sensitive, very much empathic, are picking up on people's emotions and feelings all the time? So much so that it's so overwhelming at such a young age that we think we just got to shove it all away, can't deal with it, put it away. And then we think we don't feel. And then we think we can't feel until we start to realize different ways to explore and potentially thin the veil, as you shared. So I know that some of our listeners are going to be like, that's not me, that's not me. And I'm like, could it be though? Could it be? I don't know. So you did
my gosh, Nina.
Go ahead.
When I went to my first therapist, because it was so taboo back then, you didn't go to somebody and pay them money to talk about your dirty secrets. But I just used to get so frustrated. He'd always want to go back to the emotion and identify the emotion. And I'd be like, fluffing, can you give me a freaking list? I barely know happy, mad, sad, glad. I've been shut down and I've been tromping like a soldier. Don't get in my way with this emotion crap. And it is so key to becoming a truly empowered human being.
Oh my gosh, I could not agree with you more. That self-awareness of our emotions, right? Like in therapy land, we call it emotional literacy, right? It's like, how literate are you with your emotions? Can you label them? Can you name them, right? I know, right? And so I think about that movie Inside Out, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, all you have to do is think about the core five, right? Joy, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. Just think about the core five. Now, what shade of one of those are you feeling potentially right now? And sometimes that helps simplify it for people when they just, okay, I just got to think about those core five. Now, what shade am I feeling? Is this a shade of anger, shade, right? Something like that. Sometimes that's a helpful tool. And sometimes we really do have to be brought back to the moment to be able to identify, oh, this is so uncomfortable. What am I feeling here? It's not enough just to know the language. We really have to feel it in the body, and maybe even in relationship with someone, right? Somebody who says, hey, I just noticed this is what happened, right? Like a therapist sometimes. And yet
I love the body work in particular. I mean, the talk modality was really important to get the story down. But like after decades, I found myself straight back at square one. And it wasn't until I really started doing the somatic work, meaning going within, exploring the color, the texture, the tenure, the timeline, and then allowing it out and replacing it with golden light, meditation, breath work, singing, humming.
Yes. I thank you so much for bringing that in, right? We're about to go into Susan's story, I promise y'all, but this bit of the somatic component is so critically important. It is so easy for us to talk ourselves in and out and around stories, right? It's a story. But then we're given stories and then we tell ourselves we should believe stories, and like should, I'm always like, flag that should, y'all, flag the should. But the somatic work, there's something about, like, the body doesn't lie after a point, right? We misinterpret its signals, I think, a lot, right? We put story on it, but our body can tell us so much about what we are truly experiencing. So that somatic component is really, really important, in particular for trauma work. And the image that you gave us, Susan, already was, you said treacherous journey, right? There's a treacherous territory, treacherous land. Treacherous was the word you used. And the question that I know we're going to be exploring for you is, how can we transform trauma from narcissistic abuse? Would you share your story a bit in a nutshell for us?
I'm going to share it as it pertains to narcissistic abuse because I knew that word, just like I knew the word alcoholism, but didn't really understand the depth that that could penetrate and what that could present as it pertained to my life. So I grew up in a very chaotic environment. My dad is a genius astrophysicist, but he was also an alcoholic. The whiskey cork would unpop in that bottle at 7:30 a.m. and you'd hear glug, 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 glug. He also was a womanizer, and he had an issue with narcissism that I did not identify until much later. My mother soothed through food, and back then they prescribed diet pills, which were straight speed.
Oh my gosh.
So, and she also had a bit of a mental illness. The playing field was not even. There was a lot of joy, there was a lot of competition, and there was a lot of explosiveness that would come out of nowhere, furious and fast. And I left the day after my high school graduation with a vision of getting to New York City. And I did get there when I was 19. I was living in Greenwich Village for the first time on my own, doing a college internship, and went there after college. And through a circuitous route, I became known for matching celebrities with brands. And
really?
One of my first deals was to knock on the door of the factory and convince Andy Warhol to do a commercial for Pontiac that he did not want to do. And then I was led to Roger Ailes, who was running his own network and CNBC at the time. And he wanted celebs to come on his network and didn't understand why we couldn't get them there. So one night I grabbed a cameraman, went to some red carpet event, stuck the microphone in the celebs' faces, and then had them look to camera and say, "I'm so-and-so and you're watching." And that promo captured Roger's attention. And he called me up to his office. And he gave me an odd interview, one that I'm glad I didn't pass, but we'll get to that later, or maybe we won't.
Okay.
And said, "Name the show you want to produce because you're going to be a stellar producer." And that's how I got my start producing for television. And then he launched Fox News Channel and invited me to help with the launch. And then I was invited to LA for what I thought was a great career move. And it was, but really it was to meet the man who would become my greatest guru, as in the word teacher. And that man would become also my ex-husband. So yeah, what I'm missing is I got clean from addiction in my early 20s because I saw the same red flags that had come up in my family system coming up in my own life.
How long had you been struggling with addiction? I'm hearing you got clean in your 20s. How long have you been struggling with it?
Oh, probably since I was 6 and the Oreos came out my nose from the self-soothing. Yeah, it wasn't always alcohol. It was more food was the first go round, and also exercise. Like I was a dancer since I was 3 and compulsively exercising and using it like a bulimic.
So and then ways it can express.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the next decade was facing clinical depression and learning what that was. And then ultimately it was narcissistic abuse because I didn't understand as an empath. I was feeding the soul of narcissists, and they are abundant within the entertainment industry. They are abundant, period. And I know it's a buzzword, but here I was in LA working this dream job. And I met the man that I thought was my dream partner. He said all the right things. And
so charming, I'm sure.
fell for it. I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. And I
Can I
knew there were red flags.
can I ask you a question too before you go into right? We've got the charm, we've got the character set up. I'm ready for the rest of the story. But you did share something about right. Narcissistic is such a buzzword. When you talk about this narcissistic character, this narcissistic abuse, what is narcissism for you? How would you describe it?
Someone who's self-absorbed and serves self
Mhm.
at your own detriment and has no boundaries in that arena. They are the eternal victim,
Mm,
and you will never win because they are the victim and you are the abuser,
mm.
regardless. And they have no issue with take
Okay.
until you're trained.
Until you're trained in dot dot dot.
Service, and then you're drained because you will never point a finger back. Three fingers will come straight back at you.
So until you're trained in
And
their story.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And I was very codependent. I had very
Mm,
low self esteem and self
mm,
worth. I was highly accomplished. I took risks that I look back on now and go, oh my gosh, how did I ever do that? I've
yes.
I've stood up to things that people would cower from
Mhm.
and walked through very bravely with honesty and integrity.
Mm,
But this was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I am grateful because it was like a perfect storm came together. Everything I learned to survive my childhood,
mhm,
my recovery from addiction, what I
mhm,
learned on how to work with clinical depression,
mhm,
the long-term meditation retreats I took part in,
mhm,
endurance athletics, all came into play for surviving and transforming the trauma of being narcissistically abused.
mhm,
So here I was in what became a marriage. We had a son. I bought a home for our family
mhm.
and was responsible for repairs and taxes and bringing in the groceries. That if he opened the refrigerator and there wasn't, well, there's nothing in here to eat. It's
You had
like
to fix it. You had to solve it.
I was the solution meister. I mean, towards the end of the relationship, he volunteered to go to the paint store with me, and I burst into tears for the support. So
Mm,
finally, I saw through his ruse
mhm,
and was terrified. But I thought, okay, I can save our marriage, though I knew it was well past its expiration date,
mhm.
by creating a postnuptial agreement going into mediation. And he agreed. And we got to the last point, and I thought, oh, our marriage is going to be saved. Our son won't have to experience a broken home.
Mm,
We got to the last point, Nina,
mhm,
and his eyes went in those cold slits and he
mhm.
crossed his arms and he said, I'm hiring an attorney and I'm filing for divorce. And that intuitive voice came over my right shoulder and through my heart. And it said, this is the universe doing for you
Ooh.
what you cannot do for yourself. And I relied on that voice. He promptly took up residence in our master bedroom. And I, by choice, took a mattress across the house into the garage where there was a partial conversion. And that was my monastery for the
Mm,
calendar year it took
mhm.
to come to a settlement. I held no contact, meaning no verbal contact and no eye contact,
In
because
the
that's
same
what's
household?
in the same domicile. I won't even call it a home at that
Mm,
point, but
same domicile.
that's what it, yeah, that's what it takes to really and truly extricate yourself from narcissism and
Mhm,
narcissistic
mhm.
abuse. And within a calendar year,
Yes.
I could write him his six-figure check and he could go on to his next victim. And I turned that trauma into triumph
Yes.
because you remember I said he was my greatest guru, my greatest teacher.
You
And
did
I
say
have appreciation for him because for so long I was broken. I needed that outside approval.
mhm,
And
mm,
after this experience, that approval came inside of me and my own
mhm,
heart. I
mhm,
understood self love
mm.
and my own power authentically for the first time.
Susan, thank you so much for sharing. I have some questions on my heart. Can I ask them?
You can ask me anything, Nina.
Thank you. you're going through this journey. We've got a childhood of surviving, right? A childhood of surviving, developing coping skills, maladaptive over time, but coping skills nonetheless at a very young age, right? You said you started with food, we moved into exercise, right? And I'll share a little bit after we explore some of these questions in a bit on emotional sobriety for our listeners out there, some of the tools that we use on when we talk about emotional sobriety. But you get to this point where you're meeting this man. He ends up being inspiring and charming enough that you fall for him, right? In some way, shape, or form. You eat the story that he's trying to feed you, right? We end up eating that. How many of us out there, we know that this is a part of our story? At what point did you realize, snap, crackle, pop, something is off about this? Did it take the divorce? Was it something sooner? Was there any point where you were like, wow, this is a flag. Maybe something's not right here?
Oh, it was way sooner. I didn't want to go on the second date. But a friend of mine said, you really need to listen to how he talks about his mother. He adores her. And yeah, what could I say? I was codependent. I was dependent, and I thought, okay, and I started to fall for the charms instead of see the flags.
Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing your honesty about that. For everyone out there who says, I'm seeing the yellow flags, I'm seeing the red flags, do you hear how early on Susan has courageously acknowledged she heard the flags? She saw the flags. She didn't want to fill in the blank, right? In this case, go on the date. How honest are we being with ourselves? And it takes courage, y'all, I ain't gonna lie. How honest are we being with ourselves about how soon we really see the flags, right? Flags for anything that's a yellow flag or red flag out there, right? But we are talking specifically about this narcissistic abuse piece. And one of the images that I try to explore with people when they say, I don't understand, people are saying, my partner might be narcissistic, I'm not really sure, what does it mean? I sort of liken it to, imagine this is a person who lives in a cave, and everything that they tell themselves echoes back in that cave about them. It's about them. It's about their world. Every time they say something, of course, it hits the cave wall, and it should be about them, right? So the second you try to bring in a different narrative into that cave, and it doesn't fit, something that makes them look good, feel empowered, feel strong, feel like they're at the center, the second you do that, now you either have to be molded or manipulated. You have to be changed some way so that you fit the stories that should go back to that person, or you have to be removed from the cave because you no longer serve the person who owns that cave. And I think in some cases, some people are very aware that they're in a cave and that they need you to fit their story, and that they're aware that they're in a powered dynamic, in which power dynamic, y'all, the expectation is I should be able to put you down. If you're not going to agree with me, I should be able to do that, right? But then we have this flip here where we're having, Susan, thank you for acknowledging this codependent piece. How many of y'all out there, just be honest, are we struggling with that codependent piece, right? Codependent dynamics say, I'm willing to sacrifice myself for you. I will do that for you. Codependent, right? People who are struggling with that codependent dynamic or living with it or surviving with it, right? Let's be real. It's about survival. If you're surviving with that, a narcissist loves that. You're willing to sacrifice yourself for them. They will eat that up, and they will keep feeding you that story until you are no longer serve them or you remove yourself from the situation.
That says it in a nutshell. You are quite eloquent as you describe it, and that is the truth. And I was a beacon for that behavior because I was raised by that energy. Yes. And my parents learned that from their parents. It was hurt and abused children, raising hurt and abused children. Same with my ex-husband's family. He came from a brutal background, as did his parents. It's in the lineage, and we need to start talking about it to detoxify these bloodlines.
Thank you for sharing about the reality that this is intergenerational, a lot of this. This is hurt people raising people that they will hurt. And then we take those tools for survival, the ways that we survived our childhood. And if we don't do that personal work to disrupt it, we habituate it. It becomes a habit. It becomes something that we pass on. It becomes, right, the next generation's problem. And it just keeps going like that. So many families dealing with this because they don't know how, or they're not willing to disrupt it. And it takes courage to do that.
Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, Nina, but it seems to be my mission. I mean, I've had this glittering career in the entertainment industry and worked with amazing household names, but writing the book that I did, Toxic Family: Transforming Childhood Trauma into Adult Freedom, is my mission. And believe me, it was very difficult to publish that book. It wasn't so as difficult to write it once I sat down to do it, and to get it out on paper and come up with helpful tools. But yeah, that is a taboo topic. And I love my family. I mean, I see them as helping me, perfectly placed in my movie for the opportunity of my own soul evolution.
The opportunity of my own soul evolution. What a line. And I don't mean that in a way of like, what a line, right? Like scripted. I mean, what a mantra, what a statement, right? What a foundation to live on.
It's very powerful, and it's very difficult to sit for very long in the victim or the martyr role using that mantra.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I'm really enjoying our conversation, Nina.
Thank you so much. I am as well. My whole body is like, again, just that sense of peace and ease here in talking about challenging, right, things, but like, let's transform it, right? Really, let's transform it.
Yeah, there's no reason to eat the rat poison and expect the traumatizer to drop over.
Oh my gosh, yes, right? So there is one piece that I said I would bring back later about emotions, right? And you had shared about the different coping skills that you had. One of the ways that we explore emotional sobriety, right, is I say, hey, first off, do you know what emotional sobriety is? And it's when we can really feel all of our feelings and let them move out and through us so that we can keep responding to what's happening in life. Does this make sense so far?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so the great thing about emotional sobriety is you get to feel all your feelings, again, responding to the real world. It doesn't mean that you don't feel, right? You do feel, sometimes intensely, but it's manageable and it passes out and through you, right? It's time, it's responding to time, and then it moves on. So one of the challenges that we find when we have something that's so intense or happens often enough that's invalidating in our world is we have an emotion that will pop up and it will say, hey, it looks like you don't really have the skills to deal with this. I think maybe you should just like move out of the spotlight a little, but don't worry, I'm going to take over from here. And then it's like we're emotionally hijacked. So maybe it's our sadness, maybe it's our anger, maybe it's some other piece of us, right, emotionally that says, hey, you don't have the skills, but still needs us to survive. So we have this right character, this you when you were a kid who said, hey, I still need to survive. I'm having really big feelings, dealing with really big things that are happening in my household. Let me start with Oreos. I'm going to just soothe myself. I'm going to calm myself. Did I get that right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, right? And then what ends up happening with that feeling is it's like, oh, see, all we have to do is that. It's fine. Like, you don't even have to deal with me. Just focus on the Oreos, right? Just focus on the Oreos. And then we get to feel like we're in control. And so when I invite people to explore their own emotional sobriety, I ask the questions and I say, first off, are you in your own spotlight? Are you really running your show right now of your life? Or is one of your emotions hijacking you? Is it running the show of your life? And then with that said, if we can be like, wow, actually, I think sadness is hijacking me. I think anger is hijacking me. I think fear is hijacking me, or disgust, right? Shame, guilt, those are shades of disgust. Whatever that emotion is that it feels like is hijacking us, if you can answer that question honestly, my next question would be, now, what is it telling you it's okay to go use or do so that you don't have to feel that feeling? Whatever it is that's hijacking you, what is it okay? Is it okay for you to engage in random sex? Is it okay for you to engage in drugs, in drinking, right? Fill in the blank, whatever that thing is that it says, if you can feel like you're in control with that over there, you won't have to feel me emotionally. And I love when we think of it this way, as odd as that may sound to some people, because then the reality becomes, you're telling me if I gain skills to actually feel this feeling and deal with this feeling, depression, anger, suicidality, if you're telling me if I get skills to deal with this, then I won't need that coping skill over there. And the answer is ideally like, yes, we can figure out what it is that's going to work for you. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is this journey of how do we help you transform, right? From a survival, you needed that emotion to hijack you to survive that situation. But now it's maladaptive. You're not in that situation anymore, right? I'm not a kid, right? Anymore, for those of us who did have child abuse or assault when we were kids, right? And so I really appreciated you being willing to share the reality of how it shifted, what those coping skills were, what it was that you could focus on so that you didn't have to focus on the feelings. And then golden nugget, after you realized, oh, wait, I don't want to do the alcohol right at the end. It was like, oh no, that's not going to be. Then what was left? The emotional bit, the depression that you had to work through, and then having to figure out the skills to deal with a sadness hijacking, right? And that's, I'm oversimplifying it, right? But a sadness hijacking that becomes more, because depression is more than sadness for my friends out there who are struggling with this. Then you move forward. You have this guru, you have this teacher, and then he ends up, thank goodness, saying he's going to extricate himself because it frees you. What did you do after that? What did you do with your newfound freedom?
I collapsed because I didn't know freedom like that. And what I had walked through was so excruciating. That's why I staved that journey off for so long with all the defective modes of transportation. So it took a while for me to really stand fully in my own being authentically. I picked up the tools that I knew. I went into endurance athletics again, like with a fierce vengeance until I could not walk around my block. And that false construct fell, and I had to piece my reality back together authentically. And I stayed out of relationship. I had one date by choice in 7 years, Nina, because I didn't trust my own inner being. And I had to walk through all of that and really embrace it all and see the beauty in it too. And have the pride that I was ultimately walking through what I feel has been one of my most powerful lessons of this lifetime, and maybe several others combined.
Wow. Thank you for your honesty and sharing everything you have. And in particular, the image that stays with me after what you just said is that you collapsed. You did not know freedom, right? You were not used to, I'm going to flip it, the weight of freedom or the relief of freedom. Your body was used to a particular kind of weight. And this was very new, very different. And so the collapse. Audience out there listening, do you hear that Susan was able to get back up? Sometimes the collapse is inevitable and must occur because you need to release and relieve yourself of a weight that no longer serves you. You're not in survival mode anymore and you have capacity for more. Sometimes the collapse is inevitable and then we get back up. This is emotional resilience. This is that transforming from something that knocks you down, we get back up, the transformation. We're nearing the end of the episode, and there's so many beautiful moments that we have shared, Susan, and explored with you, and I'm so grateful for this. I want to know takeaways, teachable moments we've already gone through, but takeaways from this episode. We set out to transform a hard conversation into teachable moments. What is sitting with you now that we've walked through some of that territory?
Yeah, well, I would really love everyone to know that you're not alone and that it is possible to move through the most profound experiences and that there is heaven waiting on the other side for you. Believe me.
I love that image. Thank you, Susan, for sharing that. It immediately brought up the image in my mind when I have people tell me that they're so afraid, they don't want to make the change. It's like, let me choose the devil I know versus the devil I don't, sort of thing. And there's this assumption already that there's going to be a devil on the other side, right? And you just said there's heaven on the other side, right? To really, I want to invite the audience right now to really consider if you had a tunnel, it was a dark tunnel, and you say, no, I'd rather stay over here in the wreckage. I'd rather stay on this side where I know on this side of the tunnel there's wreckage. Yeah, sure, Nina, it's chaotic over here. It's painful, but I at least know what I'm getting. If I walk through this dark tunnel to the other side, I don't know what's going to be there. What's the worst thing that could happen? Maybe it's just as bad as this side. What's the best thing that could happen? Maybe you can't even imagine that yet. But could you give yourself permission to just get curious about what if it was nothing like the side that you were on? What if it was different? Would you be willing to just walk through the tunnel? I love to end our episodes with adventure challenges, Susan. And it's something for our audience to take from this episode and to sort of let digest or chew on or even make active in their life between this week and next week. I want to ask you if you have any adventure challenges for them. And then I think I'm gonna do some soul searching, and I'm gonna see if I have anything for them in this moment. But I'm gonna roll the ball over to you. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I really like the idea of taking a breath and a pause and asking yourself, is this the most loving thing I can do for me in this moment? And 9 times out of 10, Nina, I shift.
Is this the most loving thing that I could do for me in this moment? Adventure challenge for our empowered humans out there. This is a beautiful question, rather simple, and yet, right? And yet it is the willingness to do the work after and really answer this question and take action. That's where the work comes in. So my invitation, I'm going to jump off of Susan's offering, and I'm going to say, if this were your mantra for the upcoming week, just the upcoming week, right? 5 days, 7 days, whatever you want to make it, you get to choose, right? If you're like, Nina, I only want a 3-day week, fantastic. You choose a 3-day week, but get your little magic marker or something, a pen, paper, see if you can write that question down and post it up on a mirror or your fridge, something you're going to see every day, and see if you can run that question by yourself every day as your new mantra just for the upcoming week, and see what kind of change you can make happen in your life. Really, really giving yourself the opportunity here to look at yourself and to ask yourself, is this the most loving thing that I could do for myself in this moment? And you just be honest with yourself. That is going to be our adventure challenge for the upcoming week. Susan, thank you so much for your time, your energy. We're at the end of the episode. How can people reach out to you if they want to share, if they want to give their thoughts, their thanks? What's the best way to find you?
Just go to susangold.us. It's all there. And hopefully we'll link it below. And just thank you, Nina. Thank you very much for the content you're producing and the conversation you're creating and the changes you're making to create empowered human beings.
Susan, thank you so much for that gratitude. And I feel it so comfortably in my chest. I really appreciate that. And of course, it will definitely be linked for everyone out there. So y'all don't even have to rewind. You can just scroll on down to the show notes. Susan's links will be in there. You can explore and figure out how you connect to this material. Definitely engage in your adventure challenge. It is an offering on the table. If it's not right for you, you can just put it on the shelf, right? And if it is, you just take it and run with it. It's totally up to you. The option is yours. Thank you all so much for listening in. And Susan, thank you so much for your time and your energy and your sharing. All right, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you so much for being willing to explore healing your humanity on Empowered Human. I hope you found at least one new way to transform your worldview from powered to empowered. If you took something from the show, please take a moment of your time and subscribe to Empowered Human. And if it really nourished you, leave us a review. Your feedback helps me understand what our community needs. Not to mention, it helps others discover the empowered human life. So keep this last bit in mind. All the visual goodies come with me on Instagram at Dramatherapist Nina. Stay up to date there on upcoming episodes, behind the scenes goodness, and reels dropping knowledge. Thank you again for being part of the empowered human community. Until next time, stay curious.